Have you ever wondered why some people spend years chasing money, yet never become wealthy, while others start from an average background and end up becoming millionaires? I studied the habits, interviews, and daily decisions of 50 self-made millionaires very carefully. And the deeper I understood them, the clearer one thing became. Almost every successful millionaire shared 6 common habits. These were the habits that dictated every financial decision they made. And when their decisions changed, their income, opportunities, and the direction of their entire lives changed too. Today we're going to unlock those 6 wealth locks, the hidden principles behind every millionaire's mindset and every financial decision they make. So listen carefully, my friend. Once you understand these 6 locks, you'll understand the money game. The first lock has almost nothing to do with money. It starts inside the human mind. Most people think poverty only limits what someone can afford. Behavioral research suggests something much more complicated. Scarcity also consumes your attention. When every week becomes a race against bills, debt, and unexpected expenses, your brain starts allocating more and more of its energy toward immediate survival. Imagine you're trying to solve a complex puzzle, and someone interrupts you every 30 seconds. Now imagine those interruptions never stop. That's what chronic financial scarcity often feels like. Not because people become less intelligent, but because survival keeps demanding their attention. Psychologists and behavioral economists call this a reduction in mental bandwidth. The challenge isn't a lack of ability. The challenge is that urgent problems crowd out important ones. Planning, learning, comparing opportunities, thinking years ahead. All of these become difficult when today's problems refuse to wait until tomorrow. This creates one of the cruelest paradoxes in modern economics. The people who need the clearest long-term financial decisions the most are often the very people forced to spend most of their mental energy dealing with short-term emergencies. Scarcity doesn't just reduce purchasing power, it quietly reduces foresight. And foresight is one of the foundations on which wealth is built. Which naturally brings us to the second lock. The second lock is so common that most people never even question it. From childhood, we're taught one simple exchange. Give your time, get your paycheck, repeat. It feels safe. It feels predictable. And for millions of people, it's the only realistic place to start. There's nothing wrong with earning a wage. The problem begins when wages become the only engine driving your financial life forward. Because time has a limit that money never does. There are only 24 hours in a day. No matter how disciplined you become, you can never negotiate for a 25th hour. That means anyone who's completely dependent on selling their hours will eventually run into the same invisible ceiling. Work more, earn more, run out of hours. Now imagine 2 people working in the same business. One shows up every morning, puts on an apron, serves customers, and earns an hourly wage. The other works long days too. He solves problems, he manages employees, he makes difficult decisions, but he's building something fundamentally different. One gets paid because he shows up, while the other gets paid because he owns part of the system. At first, the difference seems small. They both look busy, they both look hardworking, but over time, their financial paths begin to separate in ways that are almost invisible. Every customer who walks through the door helps pay the employee. That very same customer also helps increase the value of the owner's business. One transaction, 2 completely different outcomes. This distinction becomes even clearer when we look at one of the most recognizable companies in the world. When Ray Kroc expanded McDonald's across America, he eventually realized that the company's greatest strength wasn't just selling hamburgers. It was controlling the valuable real estate beneath thousands of restaurants. Food generated revenue. The land quietly accumulated value. One created cash flow. The other created long-term wealth. The difference between those 2 outcomes became one of the biggest lessons in modern business. Wealth rarely comes from simply working harder, More often, it comes from owning something that continues creating value even when you're not personally doing every single task. This doesn't mean everyone needs to own a global company. Ownership can take many different forms: a small business, investments, equity, intellectual property, even digital products. The specific vehicle matters less than the principle itself. Millionaires don't just ask, how can I make more money today? They ask, how can I own something that keeps producing value tomorrow? The first question increases income. The second builds wealth. And that brings us to the third lock. At first, this lock seems almost boring because its results are practically invisible in the beginning. That's exactly why so many people underestimate it. Imagine planting two identical trees on the same day. One gets watered consistently for years. The other only gets attention once in a while. For weeks, they look almost the same. Even after months, the difference isn't dramatic. But give them enough time and the gap becomes impossible to ignore. Money often behaves the same way. Most people expect wealth to grow in straight lines, but wealth rarely grows that way. It grows through compounding. Small gains begin creating more gains. Those gains begin creating even larger gains, and over time, growth starts accelerating on its own. That's why the early years feel so frustrating. You put in effort, save consistently, invest patiently, and it feels like almost nothing is happening. The temptation is to quit. But compounding rewards consistency, not excitement. The wealthiest investors in history understood something that most people never fully appreciate. Time isn't just another resource. It's the multiplier that makes every other resource more valuable. $1 invested today and $1 invested 10 years from now may look exactly the same, but they don't have the same future. The earlier dollar has more time to grow, more opportunities to compound, and more chances to multiply. This is why consistency often beats intensity. Saving a little every month for decades usually creates a far bigger result than making one big financial move and then doing nothing afterward. Compounding doesn't reward people who move the fastest. It rewards the people who stay in the game the longest. And that's exactly why so many millionaires become dramatically wealthier later in life. Not because they suddenly started working harder, but because years of consistent decisions finally began producing exponential results. Which naturally leads us to the fourth lock. This lock has very little to do with intelligence. Instead, it has everything to do with environment. Human beings constantly absorb the expectations of the people around them, the conversations they hear, the habits they watch, the standards they accept. Over time, these invisible influences quietly shape what they believe is normal. If everyone around you believes that debt is unavoidable, you'll probably see debt as normal. If everyone around you believes investing is risky, you'll probably avoid investing too. If everyone around you believes wealth is only for lucky people, you'll eventually stop believing it's possible for yourself. Most people don't consciously choose their financial beliefs. They inherit them. What brings us to the final lock: time. Not the hours that you work, the years that you give your decisions to compound. Economists sometimes call this cumulative advantage. Small differences rarely ever stay small. A slightly better decision today, a slightly bigger investment, a slightly stronger network, a slightly healthier financial habit. In the moment, none of them feel life-changing. But decades later, they don't look small anymore. Imagine two airplanes leaving from the same airport. One plane changes its direction by just a single degree. For the first few minutes, they look like they're flying together. Hours later, they're landing in completely different cities. Money behaves the exact same way. Life behaves the exact same way. Tiny decisions, consistently repeated, quietly separate futures. And this brings us right back to where this documentary started. Two hardworking people. Same effort, same discipline. Different outcomes. Not because one deserved success more than the other. Not because one was lazy. But because one gradually escaped the wealth lock, while the other never even realized it existed. The uncomfortable truth is that hard work has never been the enemy. Hard work is often the foundation. But foundations alone don't build houses. They just make them possible. Real wealth begins when effort is combined with ownership. when knowledge is combined with patience, when income is combined with assets, and when today's decisions keep creating value long after today's work is done. Maybe the biggest financial mistake isn't that you are working too hard. It is believing that hard work by itself is the finish line. Because the economy doesn't remember how exhausted you were. It remembers what you built. The question was never whether you were ready to work. The real question is whether your work is creating something that will keep working long after you stop. That single difference has quietly separated financial survival from lasting wealth for generations. And once you see the locks, you stop blaming the effort. You start focusing on the keys.